The hard truth that we have to accept about having tight hips is that we need to do a mobility routine every day to feel better. But here's the good news. It doesn't need to be like this super complicated, fancy hip mobility routine that's impossible to do. It doesn't need to be this super long, hour-long class that you need to do exactly perfectly for your hips to feel better. It simply needs to be a few really useful and usable movements that work for you and your body. And that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to go through one of the routines I teach my students all the time that they can do on their own. And just a few minutes a day can help you feel better. And I know we're all busy, but think about it like this. We spend so much time looking for medications and shots and sometimes surgery to feel better in our hips. And often the solution is simply to do a useful and usable routine most days. Now, sometimes we need medications and shots and surgeries, and you need to do what works for you and your body at this point in time. But adding in a useful and usable mobility routine into your day, it can only help. So we're going to get started, and the main thing, and by the way, these are my wrist weights. I use them all the time. It helps me so much with bone density and feeling strong. You can ask me about them. But the thing I want to focus on right now is your hip mobility routine. We're going to be using a timer for these exercises because I want you to see how just a minute of this and a minute of that and a minute of this can help you feel so much better. And it only takes a few minutes a day to feel better. I'll show you what I mean. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to lie down on our backs. And when we lie down on our backs, we have what we like to call a low V with our arms. And our feet are a little bit wider than hip width apart. I'm starting the timer, and we're just going to shift the legs side to side. So the main thing we want to think about with this is that we're not looking for any pain here. If pain worked, it would have worked years ago. We're looking to warm up the hips and let the body know that we're working on a few simple, useful, and usable movements that's going to help our hips feel better today. That's going to help us move better today. If you need to go slower, please go slower. But try not to go, at least for this one, faster. And just kind of see what happens when we stay with something, in this case a minute, long enough for it to work. And even if the rest of the exercises are too much for you today, try doing this one. I also love doing this one when I wake up in the morning, right? From here, roll over to your side and bring yourself up into any kind of seated position. And notice what a 1 minute investment has already done for your hips. Maybe a little bit more body aware, maybe a little bit more warm, but just notice for yourself how you feel. We're moving on to the next thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to lean back onto our hands, and we're going to let our legs fall towards our right. And we're going to just stay back here. Now, this is uncomfortable staying like this. You can lie down, but see if you can stay up. So I'm going to start the timer. We're going to do this for 1 minute. And we're going to take this back leg, which is our left leg in this case, up and down. Now, you might not be able to lift this up high. So just focus on lifting this up a little bit. If it's way too much for you, you can lean back so that you're lying on your back. But let's see if we can stay with this. What usually happens is the first few times we go through this exercise, we're lifting the leg up a little bit. Then you come back to this video, right? And we do this again together. And you'll notice over time that your left hip becomes more mobile, that you have a bigger range of motion, that the minute doesn't seem so dreadfully long. And of course, if it's too long, you stop anytime. Everything that you do for your practice needs to be adaptable and adjustable. That's how it works. Let's get a few more times. That was 1 minute. Whew. All right. Come to the center. Sit in a seated position and notice the difference between the leg you just worked and the leg you're going to work. Exercise works when you know how to work it. Let's go to the other side. So you're going to pivot your legs to the other side. So the left leg is forward and the right leg is back. And you're leaning back so that you're not hating this exercise. You're just kind of relaxed in the rest of the body. The timer is on. You're going to take this back leg and you'll lift it up and down. Now, take your time with this and you'll notice that one leg is easier than the other. And you want to be a researcher and not a judge, right? It's so easy to judge ourselves and to think, oh, I'm so tired, I'm never going to get through this, I'm never going to get better at this. Be a researcher. Be, okay, one side's tighter than the other. Of course that makes sense. We cross our legs more on one side than the other. The way we walk, the way we sit, the way we stand. Maybe one side has more arthritis than the other. That's all right. Be a researcher and not a judge. And trust that when you come back to this class, because you're going to save this video, right? When you come back to this sequence, your range of motion will get better and you'll be able to do this exercise more efficiently. Let's get a few more times to make it a minute. Sometimes a minute can feel like a long time, especially if it's the first time you're doing these. Whew, that was 1 minute. Sit again in a relatively comfortable position. And notice the heat, the mobility, the intelligence in your lower body. And if a minute was too long, that's also okay. You're doing it for 30 seconds, and every time you come back to this class, because I want you to save this class, it will be easier. We have one more exercise. We're going to lean back on our hands. The legs are in front, and you're going to pivot your legs to the right. Then we're going to take our hands to the front of the shin. Now, if this is too much for you, you can put your hands on a yoga block or even a chair, but you want to have your upper body relatively relaxed. Now, bring your attention to your rear leg, right? So the first exercise, we went up like this. Now we're going to do the opposite movement. We're going to rotate the thigh so it's facing the floor. You're going to relax your foot and then you're going to rotate up and down. Now this is going to be a small movement. The timer is on, by the way. And if it is way too much for you, just focus on pushing that back knee down into the floor. But if you can, try and lift the leg. Now the first time you do this, it might be a little bit. And then you're going to come back to this class because you're going to save this class, right? And you're going to lift the leg up a little bit higher. And the only goal is that we're rotating the thigh in the hip socket, right? The femur in the hip socket. And if it needs to be a little bit, that's okay. The goal of these movements is to remind your body that it's capable of moving in all directions. Because what happens, we get so stiff because we sit too much, we don't move a lot, that our body forgets how capable it is of moving. And it stiffens up. That was 1 minute. Let's flip it over to the other side. So lean back, pivot, and take your hands down in front of your opposite shin. Lean over as much as you need. And if you need to have your hands on yoga blocks or a chair, that's absolutely fine. The timer is on. We're going to lift and lower. Now, one side will be higher or easier than the other. That's all right. Be a researcher and not a judge. The main thing we want to think about is that when you come back to this class, because it's super important that you do this routine on a regular basis, the range of motion will increase, your comfort with the exercises will increase, and it will just become, this routine will just become something that you do most days to feel better. And when you think about, we have about 15 seconds, what we do some days to feel better. We drink a cup of coffee, we take a walk, we call our favorite person. We could do this most days to feel better. Let's get one more time. Whew, so good. So that was 2 exercises, 1 minute each, to feel better in the hips. And we don't need a zillion exercises. We don't need hours and hours, but we do need to be consistent with what we do so that we can feel better in the body we live in now. Give that a try. Save this class. Come back to this routine and let me know how it goes, because exercise works when you know how to work it.